They're totally anxious over here, Sierra especially. Here. Let me see. Okay. Let me get my books out. Hold on, you two. Hold on. Where's it? Where's the ball? Where is it? Where is it? Where's the ball? Oh, right under the bench. Okay. Let's see here. Reading glasses. Sierra, you have to drop it right here, not under the bench. Right there. Where is it? I can't find it when you put it under the bench. Okay. Now this chapter wasn't that exciting, but there was a little bit of good stuff in it. Okay. Hold on, you two. The social aspect of the self. Where's the ball? Can you leave it here? Bring it here. Drop it here. Bring it here. Go get it. Bring it here. Right here. There you go. Boy, my hair's wild today. My God. Okay. Today, the enormous growth population, especially obvious in large cities, inevitably has a depressing effect on us. All right, calm down. We think, oh well, I am only so-and-so living at such and such an address like thousands of other people. If a few of them got killed, what difference can it make? There are far too many people in any case. And when we read in the paper about the deaths of innumerable unknown people who personally mean nothing to us, the feeling that unknown people who personally mean nothing to us, the feeling that our lives count for nothing, is further increased. This is the moment when attention to the unconscious brings the greatest help, for dreams show the dreamer how each detail of his life is interwoven with the most significant realities. What we all know theoretically, that everything depends on the individual, becomes through dreams a palpable fact that everyone can experience for himself. Sometimes we have a strong feeling that the great man wants something from us and has set us very special tasks. Our response to this experience can help us to acquire the strength to swim against the stream of collective prejudice by taking our own soul seriously into account. I am not 67. Jeez, golly. Give me a 3. You guys are funny. I'm 76. I'm not 67. I'm 76. Get it right. God. Let's see here. Good morning. What we all know theoretically. Now, will you guys shut up and listen? What we all know theoretically. Okay, I already read that one. Naturally, this is not always an agreeable task. For instance, you want to make a trip with friends next Sunday. Then, a dream, forbids it and demands that you do some creative work instead. If you listen to your unconscious and obey it, you must expect constant interference with your conscious plans. Where's your ball, Sierra? Where is it? Where's your ball? I don't see it. Where is it? Oh, underneath the backpack. Your will is crossed by other intentions, intentions that you must submit to, or at any rate must seriously consider. That is partly why obligation attached to the process of individuation is often felt to be a burden rather than an immediate blessing. Where is it? I'll read that part again because I understand it on a very deep level. I've had to do this, and it is a challenge. That is partly why the obligation attached to the process of individuation is often felt to be a burden rather than an immediate blessing. Saint Christopher, the patron of all travelers, is a fitting symbol for this experience. Go drink water, Sierra. According to the legend, he felt an arrogant pride in his tremendous physical strength and was willing to serve only the strongest. First, he served a king, but when he saw that the king feared the devil, he left him and became the devil's servant. Then one day he discovered that the devil feared the crucifix, so he decided to serve Christ if he could find him. He followed the advice of a priest who told him to wait for Christ at a ford. In the years that passed, he carried many people across the river. But once, on a dark, stormy night, a small child called out that he wanted to be carried over the river. With the greatest ease, St. Christopher lifted the child on his shoulders, but he walked away more slowly with every step, for his burden became heavier and heavier. When he arrived in midstream, he felt as if he carried the whole universe. He realized then that he had taken Christ upon his shoulders, and Christ gave him remission of his sins and eternal life. Ooh! There it is. It bounced off the walls in the gazebo. Okay, calm down. The miraculous child is a symbol of the self that literally depresses the ordinary human being, even though it is the only thing that can redeem him. In many works of art, the Christ child is depicted as or with the sphere of the world, a motif that clearly denotes the self, for a child and a sphere are both universal symbols of totality. When a person tries to obey the unconscious, he will often, as we have seen, be unable to do just as he pleases. But equally, he will often be unable to do what other people want him to do. It often happens, for instance, that he must separate from his group. From his family, his partner, or other personal connections in order to find himself. That is why it is sometimes said that attending to the unconscious makes people antisocial or egocentric. As a rule, this is not true, for there is a little known factor that enters into this attitude: the collective, or we could say social, aspect of the self. From a practical angle, this factor reveals itself in that an individual who follows his dreams for a considerable time will find that they are often concerned with his relationships with other people. His dreams may warn him against trusting a certain person too much, or he may dream about a favorable or agreeable meeting with someone who he may previously have never consciously noticed. If a dream... Okay, I want you to take a break soon, Sierra. You're hardly breathing. If a dream does pick up the image of another person for us in some fashion, there are two possible interpretations. First, the figure may be a projection, which means that the dream image of this person is a symbol for an inner aspect of the dreamer himself. One dreams, for instance, of a dishonest neighbor, but the neighbor is used by the dream as a picture of one's own dishonesty. It is the task of the dream interpretation to find out in which special area one's own dishonesty comes into play. This is called dream interpretation on the subjective level. But it also happens at times that dreams genuinely tell us something about other people. In this way, the unconscious plays a role that is far from being fully understood. Like all the higher forms of life, man is in tune with the living beings around him to a remarkable degree. He perceives their sufferings and problems, their positive and negative attributes and values, instinctively, quite independently of his conscious thoughts about other people. Our dream life allows us to have a look at these subliminal perceptions and shows us that they have effect upon us. Go get some water, Sierra. Hold on, I'm going to throw the ball for her by the water bowl. Go drink water. Drink water. Good girl. Our dream life allows us to have a look at these subliminal perceptions and shows us that they have an effect upon us. After having an agreeable dream, you need to take a break. You're done for now. Take a rest. Go rest. Thank you. After having an agreeable dream about somebody, even without interpreting the dream, I shall involuntarily look at that person with more interest. The dream image may have deluded me because of my projections, or it may have given me objective information. To find out which is the correct interpretation requires an honest, attentive attitude and careful thought. But as the case with all inner processes, it is ultimately the self that orders and regulates one's human relationships. So long as the conscious ego takes the trouble to detect the delusive projections, so long as the conscious ego takes the trouble to detect the delusive projections and deals with these inside himself instead of outside. It is in this way that spiritually attuned and similarly oriented people find their way to one another. To create a group that cuts across all the usual social and organizational affiliations of people. Such a group is not a conflict with others. It is merely different and independent. The consciously realized process of individuation thus changes a person's relationships. The familiar bonds, such as kinship or common interests, are replaced by a different type of unity, a bond through the self. And that's happening to me right now. As we speak, I have almost zero friends, and all my old friends I am no longer in communication with. And I'm trusting my individuation process. All activities and obligations that belong exclusively to the outer world do definite harm to the secret activities of the unconscious. Through these unconscious ties, those who belong together come together. This is one reason why attempts to influence people by advertisements and political propaganda are destructive, even when inspired by idealistic motives. This raises the important question of whether the unconscious part of the human psyche can be influenced at all. Practical experience and accurate observation shows that one cannot influence one's own dreams. There are people, it is true, who assert that they can influence them, but if you look into their dream material, you find that they do only what I do with my disobedient dog. I order him to do those things I notice he wants to do anyway, so that I can preserve my illusion of authority. Only a long process of interpreting one's dreams and confronting himself with what they have to say can gradually transform the unconscious. And conscious attitudes also must change in the process. If a man who wants to influence public opinion misuses symbols for this purpose, they will naturally impress the masses insofar as they are true symbols. But whether or not the mass unconscious will be emotionally gripped by them is something that cannot be calculated in advance, something that remains completely irrational. No music publisher, for instance, can tell in advance whether a song will become a hit or not, even though it may draw on popular images and melodies. No deliberate attempts to influence the unconscious have yet produced any significant results. And it seems that the mass unconscious preserves its autonomy just as much as the individual unconscious. At times, in order to express its purpose, the unconscious may use a motif from our external world and thus may seem to have been influenced by it. For instance, I have come across many dreams of modern people that have to do with Berlin. In these dreams, Berlin stands as a symbol of the psychic weak spot, the place of danger, and for this reason is the place where the self is apt to appear. It is the point where the dreamer is torn by conflict and where he might, therefore, be able to unite the inner opposites. I have also encountered an extraordinary number of dream reactions to the film Hiroshima Mon Amour. In most of these dreams, the idea was expressed that either two lovers in the film must unite, which symbolizes the union of inner opposites, or there would be an atomic explosion, a symbol of complete disassociation, equivalent to madness. Only when the manipulators of public opinion add commercial pressure or acts of violence to their activities do they seem to achieve temporary success. But in fact, this merely causes a repression of the genuine unconscious reactions. And mass repression leads to the same result as individual repression. That is, to neurotic disassociation and psychological illness. All such attempts to repress the reactions of the unconscious must fail in the long run, for they are basically opposed to our instincts. We know from studying the social behavior of the higher animals that small groups, from approximately 10 to 50 individuals, create the best possible living conditions for the single animal as well as for the group. And man seems to be no exception in this respect. His physical well-being, his spiritual, psychic health, and beyond the animal realm, his cultural efficiency seem to flourish best in such a social formation. As far as we at present understand the process of individuation, the self apparently tends to produce such small groups by creating at the same time sharply defined ties of feeling between certain individuals and feelings of relatedness to all people. Only if these connections are created by the self. No, it's none of your business what's going on over there. Only if these connections are created by the self can one feel any assurance that envy, jealousy, fighting, and all the manner of negative projections will not break up this group? Oh my God, what did she just say? Okay. Just lost my spot. Only if these connections are created by the self can one feel any assurance that envy, jealousy, fighting, and all manner of negative projections will not break up the group. This is an unconditional devotion to one's own process of individuation. Also brings about the best possible social adaptation. This does not mean, of course, that there will not be collisions of opinion and conflicting obligations or disagreement about the right way, in the face of which one must constantly withdraw and listen to one's inner voice in order to find the individual standpoint that the self intends to have. Fanatical political activity. Not right now, you're done. Take a break. Lay down. Fanatical political activity, but not the performance of essential duties, seems somehow incompatible with individuation. A man who devoted himself entirely to freeing his country from foreign occupation had this dream. With some of my compatriots, I got up a stairway to the attic of a museum where there is a hall painted black and looking like a cabin on a ship. A distinguished-looking middle-aged lady opens the door. Her name is X, daughter of X. X was a famous national hero of the dreamer's country who attempted some centuries ago to free it. He might be compared to Joan of Arc or William Tell. In reality, X had no children. In the hall, we see the portraits of two aristocratic ladies dressed in flowery brocaded garments. While Miss X is explaining these pictures to us, they suddenly come to life. First, the eyes begin to live, and then the chest seems to breathe. People are surprised and go to a lecture room where Miss X will speak to them about the phenomenon. She says that through her intuition and feeling, these portraits came alive. But some of the people are indignant and say that Miss X is mad. Some even leave the lecture room. The important feature of this dream is that the anima figure, Miss X, is purely a creation of the dream. She has, however, the name of a famous national hero liberator, as if she were, for instance, Wilhelmina Tell, the daughter of William Tell. By the implications contained in the name, the unconscious is pointing to the fact that today the dreamer should not try, as X did long ago, to accomplished by the anima, by the dreamer's soul, who accomplishes it by bringing the images of the unconscious to life. That the hall in the attic of the museum looks partly like a ship's cabin painted black is very meaningful. The black color hints at darkness, night, a turning inward, and if the hall is a cabin, then the museum is somehow also a ship. This suggests that when the mainland of collective consciousness becomes flooded by unconsciousness and barbarism, the museum ship filled with living images may turn into a saving ark that will carry those who enter it to another spiritual shore. Portraits hanging in the museum are usually the dead remains of the past, and often the images of the unconscious are regarded in the same way until we discover that they are alive and meaningful. When the anima who appears here in her rightful role of soul guide, contemplates the images with intuition and feeling, they begin to live. The indignant people in the dream represent the side of the dreamer that is influenced by collective opinion, something in him that distrusts and rejects the bringing to life of psychic images. They personify a resistance to the unconscious that might express itself something like this: but what if they begin dropping atom bombs on us? Psychological insights won't be much help. This resistant side is unable to free itself from statistical thinking and from extroverted rational prejudices. The dream, however, points out that in our time, genuine liberation can start only with psychological transformation. To what end does one liberate one's country if afterward there is no meaningful goal of life, no goal for which it is worthwhile to be free? If man no longer finds any meaning in his life, it makes no difference whether he wastes away under a communist or capitalist regime. Only if he can use his freedom to create something meaningful is it relevant that he should be free. That is why finding the inner meaning of life is more important to the individual than anything else, and why the process of individuation must be given priority. Attempts to influence public opinion by means of newspapers, radio, television, and advertising are based on two factors. On the one hand, they rely on sampling techniques that reveal the trend of opinion or wants, that is, of collective attitudes. This is interesting because this is kind of happening today with the whole thing that's going on with Iran and Israel. And this book was copyright during the time of the Communist War, the Berlin Wall and such. That is, of collective attitudes. On the other hand, they express the prejudices, projections, and unconscious complexes, mainly the power complex, of those who manipulate public opinion. But statistics do no justice to the individual. Although the average size of stones in a heap may be 5 centimeters, one will find very few stones of exactly the size in the heap. That the second factor cannot create anything positive is clear from the start. But if a single individual devotes himself to individuation, he frequently has a positive, contagious effect on the people around him. Stay in here. Hey, fat boy, stay in here. Don't go out there. It is as if he sparks leaps from one to another. And this usually occurs when one has no intention of influencing others, and often when no one uses no words. It is onto this inner path that Miss X tried to lead the dreamer. Nearly all religious systems on our planet contain images that symbolize the process of individuation, or at least some stages of it. In Christian countries, the self is projected, as I said before, onto the second Adam, Christ. In the East, the relevant figures are those of Krishna and Buddha. For people who are contained in a religion, that is, who still really believe in its content and teachings, the psychological regulation of their lives is affected by religious symbols, and even their dreams often revolve around them. When the late Pope Pius XII issued the Declaration of Assumption of Mary, a Catholic woman dreamed, for instance, that she was a Catholic priestess. Her unconscious seemed to extend the dogma in this way. If Mary is now almost a goddess, she should have priestesses. Another Catholic woman who had resistances to some of the minor and outer aspects of her creed, dreamed that the church of her home city had been pulled down and rebuilt, but that the tabernacle with its consecrated host and the statue of the Virgin Mary were to be transferred from the old to new church. The dream showed her that some of the man-made aspects of her religion needed renewal, but that its basic symbols, God's having become man and the great Mother Virgin Mary, would survive the change. Such dreams demonstrate the living interest that the unconscious takes in the conscious religious representations of an individual. This raises the question whether it is possible to detect a general trend in all religious dreams of contemporary people. In the manifestations of the unconscious found in our modern Christian culture, whether Protestant or Catholic, Dr. Jung often observed that there is an unconscious tendency at work to round off our Tritarian formula of the Godhead with a fourth element which tends to be feminine, dark, and even evil. Actually, this fourth element has always existed in the realm of our religious representations, but it was separated from the image of God because his counterpart, in the form of matter itself, or the Lord of matter, i.e., the devil. Now the unconscious seems to want to reunite these extremes, the light having become too bright, and the darkness too somber. Naturally, it is the central symbol of religion, the image of the Godhead, that is most exposed to unconscious tendencies towards transformation. A Tibetan abbot once told Dr. Jung that the most impressive mandalas in Tibet are built up by imagination or directed fantasy. When the psychological balance of the group is disturbed, or when a particular thought cannot be rendered because it is not yet contained in the sacred doctrine and must therefore be searched for. In these remarks, two equally important basic aspects of mandala symbolism emerge. The mandala serves a conservative purpose, namely, to restore previously existing order. But it also serves the creative purpose of giving expression and form to something that does not yet exist, something new and unique. The second aspect is perhaps even more important than the first, but does not contradict it. For in most cases, what restores the old order simultaneously involves some element of new creation. In the new order, the old pattern returns on a higher level. The process is that of the ascending spiral, which grows upward while simultaneously returning again and again to the same point. A painting by a simple woman who was brought up in a Protestant surrounding shows a mandala in the form of a spiral. In a dream, this woman received an order to paint the Godhead. Later, also in a dream, she saw it in a book. Of God himself she saw only his wafting cloak, the drapery of which made a beautiful display of light and shadow. This contrasted impressively with the stability of the spiral and the deep blue sky. Fascinated by the cloak and the spiral, the dreamer did not look closely at the other figure on the rocks. When she awoke and thought about who this divine figures were, she realized that it was God himself. This gave her a frightful shock, which she felt for a long time. Usually the Holy Ghost is represented in Christian art by a fiery wheel or a dove, but here it has appeared as a spiral. This is a new thought, not yet contained in the doctrine, which has spontaneously arisen from the unconscious. That the Holy Ghost is the power that works for further development of our religious understanding is not a new idea, of course, but its symbolic representation in the form of a spiral is new. The same woman then painted a second picture, also inspired by a dream, showing the dreamer with her positive animus standing above Jerusalem with the wing of Satan descends to darken the city. The satanic wing strongly reminded her of the wafting cloak of God in the first painting, but in the former dream, the spectator is high up, somewhere in heaven, and sees in front of her a terrific split between the rocks. The movement in the cloak of God is an attempt to reach Christ. The figure on the right, but it does not quite succeed. In the second painting, the same thing is seen from below, from a human angle. Looking at it from a higher scale, what is moving and spreading is part of God. Above that rises the spiral as a symbol of possible further development. But seen from the basis of our human reality, this same thing in the air is the dark, uncanny wing of the devil. In the dreamer's life, these two pictures become real in a way that does not concern us here, but it is obvious that they also contain a collective meaning that reaches beyond the personal. They may prophesy that descent of a divine darkness upon the Christian hemisphere, a darkness that points, however, toward the possibility of further evolution. Since the axis of the spiral does not move upward, but into the background of the picture, the further evolution will lead neither to a greater spiritual height nor down into a realm of matter, but to another dimension, probably into the background of these divine figures, and that means into the unconscious. When religious symbols are partly different from those we know emerge with the unconscious of an individual, it is often feared that these will wrongfully alter or diminish the officially recognized religious symbols. This fear even causes many people to reject analytical psychology and the entire unconscious. This kind of like what happened after I kind of lost a little bit after my son was killed, and I started going to this church in Logan, Ohio, and the minister there was discouraging me from looking outside of Baptist doctrine, the Bible specifically, and shunned the idea of meditation and using crystals as a way of healing and so on and so forth, probably because it scared him, because he was so attached to his belief in the Bible and whatever life experiences he's had, which have nothing to do with me. When religious symbols that are partly different from those we know emerge from the unconscious of an individual, it is often feared that these will wrongfully alter or diminish the officially recognized religious symbols. This fear even causes many people to reject analytical psychology and the entire unconscious. If I look at such a resistance from a psychological point of view, I should have to comment that as far as religion is concerned, human beings can be divided into three types. First, there are those who genuinely believe their religious doctrines, whatever they may be. For these people, the symbols and doctrines click so satisfyingly with what they feel deep inside themselves that serious doubts have no chance to sneak in. This happens when the views of conscious and the unconscious background are in relative harmony. People of this sort can afford to look at new psychological discoveries and facts without prejudice and need not fear that they may be caused to lose their faith. Even if their dreams should bring up some relatively unorthodox details, these can be integrated into their general view. The second type consists of those people who have completely lost their faith and replaced it with purely conscious, rational opinions. For these people, depth psychology simply means an introduction into newly discovered areas of the psyche, and it should cause no trouble when they embark on new adventure and investigate their dreams to test the truth of them. Then there is a third group of people who in one part of themselves, probably in the head, no longer believe their religious traditions, whereas in some other part they still do believe. The French philosopher Voltaire is an illustration of this. He violently attacked the Catholic Church with the rational argument. But on his deathbed, according to some reports, he begged for extreme unction. And I had to look that word up because I didn't know what it meant. So, unction. Come on, where is it? I know I wrote it down. I must have not written it down. Oh, here it is. The act of anointing, as in medical treatment or a religious ceremony, a fervent or earnest quality or manner of speaking or behaving, especially in dealing with religious matter, characterized by a smooth pretense of spiritual feeling, fervor, or earnest, as in seeking to persuade, to suave or oily in speech or manner. Unction. Okay, so that sentence again is, he violently attacked the Catholic Church with rational argument, but on his deathbed, according to some reports, he begged for extreme unction. Whether this is true or not, his head was certainly unreligious, whereas his feelings and emotions seem still to have been orthodox. Such people remind one of a person getting stuck in the automatic door of a bus. He can neither get out into free space nor re-enter the bus. Of course, the dreams of such persons could probably help them out of their dilemma, but such people frequently have trouble turning toward the unconscious because they themselves do not know what they think and want. To take the unconscious seriously is ultimately a matter of personal courage and integrity. The complicated situation of those who are caught in a no man's land between the two states of mind is partly created by the fact that all official religious doctrines actually belong to the collective conscious. What Freud called, no, come here, fat boy, fat boy, fat boy. Get back in here, fat boy, Sierra, come. You guys stay in here. I don't want you running out there. You can sit in the shade. There's shade right here. You can lay down in the shade. Okay. The complicated situation of those who are caught in a no man's land between two states of mind is partly created by the fact that all official religious doctrines actually belong to the collective unconscious, what Freud called the superego. But once, long ago, they sprang from the unconscious. This is a point that many historians of religion and theologians challenge. They choose to assume that there was once some sort of revelation. I have searched for many years for concrete evidence for the Jungian hypothesis about this problem, but it has been difficult to find because most rituals are so old that one cannot trace their origin. The following example, however, seems to me to offer a most important clue. Black Elk, a medicine man of the Ogallala Sioux, who died not long ago, tells us in his autobiography, Black Elk Speaks, that when he was 9 years old, he became seriously ill and during a sort of coma had a tremendous vision. He saw 4 groups of beautiful horses coming from the 4 corners of the world, and then, seated within a cloud, he saw the 6 grandfathers and the ancestral spirits of his tribe. The grandfathers of the whole world, They gave him 6 healing symbols for his people and showed him new ways of life. But when he was 16 years old, he suddenly developed a terrible phobia whenever a thunderstorm was approaching, because he heard thunder beings calling to him to make haste. It reminded him of the thundering noise made by the approaching horses and his vision. An old medicine man explained to him that his fear came from the fact that he was keeping his vision to himself, and said that he must tell it to his tribe. He did so, and later he and his people acted out the vision in a ritual using real horses. Not merely Black Elk himself, but many other members of his tribe felt infinitely better after this play. Some were even cured of their diseases. Black Elk said even the horses seemed to be healthier and happier after the dance. The ritual was not repeated because the tribe was destroyed soon afterward, but here's a different case in which a ritual still survives. Several Eskimo tribes living near the Colville River in Alaska explain the origin of their Eagle Festival in the following way. A young hunter shot dead a very unusual eagle and was so impressed by the beauty of the dead bird that he stuffed and made a fetish of him, honoring him by sacrifices. One day, when the hunter had traveled far inland during his hunting, 2 animal men suddenly appeared in the role of messengers and led him to the land of the eagles. There he heard a dark drumming noise, and the messengers explained that this was the heartbeat of the dead eagle's mother. Then the eagle spirit appeared to the hunter as a woman clothed in black. She asked him to initiate an eagle festival among his people to honor her dead son. After the eagle people had shown him how to do this, he suddenly found himself exhausted, back in the place where he had met the messengers. Returning home, he taught his people how to perform the great eagle festival, as they have done faithfully ever since. From such examples, we see how a ritual or religious custom can spring directly from an unconscious revelation experienced by a single individual. Out of such beginnings, people living in cultural groups develop their various religious activities with their enormous influence. Cultural groups develop various religious activities with their enormous influence on the entire life of society. During a long process of evolution, the original material is shaped and reshaped by words and actions, is beautified, and acquires increasingly definite forms. This crystallizing process, however, has a great disadvantage. More and more people have no personal knowledge of the original experience and can only believe what their elders and teachers tell them about it. They no longer know that such happenings are real, and they are, of course, ignorant about how one feels during the experience. In their present forms, worked over and exceedingly aged, such religious traditions often resist further creative alterations by the unconscious. Theologians sometimes even defend these true religious symbols and symbolic doctrines against the discovery of a religious function in the unconscious psyche, forgetting that the values they fight for, owe their existence to that very same function. Without a human psyche to receive divine inspirations and utter them in words or shape them in art, no religious symbol has ever come into reality of our human life. We need only think of the prophets and evangelists. If someone objects that there is a religious reality in itself independent of the human psyche, I can only answer such a person with the question, who says this, if not the human psyche? No matter what we assert, we can never get away from the existence of the psyche, for we are contained within it, and it is the only means by which we can grasp reality. Thus, the modern discovery of the unconscious shuts one door forever. It definitely excludes the illusory idea, so favored by some individuals, that a man can know spiritual reality in itself. No, in modern physics 2, a door... Stop! Don't do that. It's none of your business. Lay down. In modern physics 2, a door has been closed by Heisenberg's principle of interdeterminacy, which I wrote that down. I don't know what it means. So I wrote it down because I like to learn what I'm reading. Heisenberg principle of indeterminacy. The uncertainty principle, also known as Heisenberg's indeterminacy principle, is a fundamental concept in quantum mechanics. It states that certain pairs of physical properties, like position and momentum, can't be simultaneously known with perfect precision. The more accurately one property is known, the less accurately the other can be known. For example, if we know everything about a particle's location, we know nothing about its momentum, and vice versa. So that's in modern physics too. A door has been closed by Heisenberg's principle of indeterminacy, shutting out the delusion that we can comprehend an absolute physical reality. The discovery of unconscious, however, compensates for the loss of these beloved illusions by opening before us an immense and unexplored new field of realizations, within which objective scientific investigation combines in a strange new way with personal ethical adventure. But as I said at the outset, it is practically impossible to impart the whole reality of one's experience in the new field. Much is unique and can be only partially communicated by language. Here, too, a door is shut against the illusion that we can completely understand another person and tell him what is right for him. I'm going to read that again. Here, too, a door is shut against the illusion that one can completely understand another person and tell him what is right for him. Once again, however, one can find a compensation for this in the new realm of experience by the discovery of the social function of the self, which works in a hidden way to unite separate individuals who belong together. Intellectual chit-chat is thus replaced by meaningful events that occur in reality of the psyche. Hence, for the individual to enter seriously into the process of individuation in the way that has been outlined means completely a new and different orientation toward life. For scientists, it also means a new and different scientific approach to outer factors. How this will work out in the field of human knowledge and in social life of human beings cannot be predicted. But to me it seems certain that Jung's discovery of the process of individuation is a fact that future generations will have to take into account if they want to avoid drifting into stagnant or even a regressive outlook. And then I'm going to read what Google brought up when I looked up process of individuation. This is what Google said. Individuation is a lifelong psychological process of developing a unique identity and integrating various aspects of life into a unified whole. Psychoanalyst Carl Jung introduced the term and considered it a central part of the human development. Goal: to become a distinct individual with a sense of self, purpose, and self-awareness. Process: involves integrating innate personality elements like life experience and the unconscious into a well-functioning whole. Jung's approach uses dream reports and active imagination to confront and integrate the shadow, dark side, and anima or animus of the personality. Outcome: a balanced personality with a higher level of consciousness where all psychological functions are fully integrated. Very cool. So that's it for this one. It actually was better than I realized. I read it late last night and was like, didn't quite it didn't quite sink in, but it did today when I read it, and it's actually a really good one. It's interesting how it correlates with what's going on today in our world. Okay, let me read these notes. Oh, I do look good for my age. 76. You guys are cute. Thank you. Give me a 360. You guys are adorable. I do look good for my age. Thank you. I'm 52. I'm 51 or 52. I don't remember.